Muchas gracias. Y ahora sí, vamos con el dato macro del día. PMI manufacturero en Estados Unidos, que baja por debajo del dato que teníamos anteriormente y que se sitúa en territorio contractivo, por debajo de los 50 puntos. Y hoy vamos a analizar un poquito más en detalle el dato de PMI manufacturero del instituto, ISM. Tenemos con nosotros a Timothy Fiore, Chair de ISM Manufacturing PMI. Timothy, good afternoon. Thank you for being in Negocios Televisión.
Yes, buenos días, Marta.
Timothy, manufacturing PMI was at 46 points in your latest survey. Consensus expected it to go up, but it hasn't. What can this mean for the U.S. economy?
Right, so we did underperform in the month of June. The economists thought we'd come in at 47 and some change, and we came in at 46. So the biggest reason for that is that the output side, which includes production and employment, sagged, went into contraction, both of them, and the two of them combined provided about a 7.7 point decline to the PMI calculation. So let me kind of just refresh your listeners. I group all 10 of these sub-indexes into three categories: demand, output, and inputs. So let's talk about demand first. Demand has been sluggish. It's been very soft. Demand is really new orders, new export orders, the resulting backlog, as well as customer inventories. The only positive on the demand side this month is that on the new order side, it didn't shrink as fast as the prior month, but at 45, that's still not a good number. But more importantly, our panelists believe that their customers have too little of their inventory on their shelves. So that's a positive, but it's only 1 month, so we'll see what happens in the month of July. On the input side, there's no sense in inputs is supplier deliveries, it's manufacturing inventory, it's imports and prices. So on the delivery side, no problem. Very accommodative. We've got suppliers delivering as fast as you want the stuff, they're able to deliver. We have lead times coming down, not as quickly as we would like, but they're coming down nonetheless. The prices number came down again significantly at the low 40s, which is very positive. It reflects wide-scale price reductions across all foundational materials, including steel and copper and aluminum, and more importantly, plastics, corrugate, which touches a lot of people. You know, the energy markets are still weak. So the inputs are all accommodated. We got good pricing structure here. Got lead times coming down, not quite where we want them to be, but they're moving in the right direction. So the big story for the month of June was really the output side. And up until this point, my analysis has indicated that panelists are managing their output consistent with their backlog levels, meaning that they're trying to output just enough product to consume just enough of the backlog so that they can make it into the second half of the year, where it was felt that the second half would be much stronger from a demand standpoint. Well, that's not happening. So the demand is not coming back. So companies are having to decide to step back their output. And as a result of that, you saw the production number drop down to 46.7, which is a low number. And in concert with that, the employment number dropped down to 48.1 because they're now determining that they don't need as many people. So I mentioned this last month to your listeners, and I think it continues. I don't want to say that 1 month is making a trend here in the month of June, but there's strong indications based on what we saw in May, what we're seeing in June, that companies are now adjusting their production plans consistent with a lower backlog, a lower order intake, and as a result of that, they're starting to lay off more people.
Are these factors that you just mentioned that explain this reading suggesting the recession is going to get to the U.S.?
Well, it's hard for me to predict a recession. We're definitely in a manufacturing recession. We've had 8 straight months of manufacturing contraction. Not every time we're in a manufacturing recession does a recession follow. In fact, it's probably more like 50%. So we're 8 months in. When we have preceded a recession, that period is generally 9 months to a year. So we're kind of sitting there now, the moment of truth. Our forecast for 2023 indicated that the second half would be better than the first half. When we updated the forecast in May, that feeling went away. The growth in CapEx, the growth in headcount, the growth in revenue, predicted revenue, had all diminished for 2023 by the time we got to May compared to where we were in December. So that's kind of where we're at. I think the feeling is here that this is the issue between a soft landing and a hard landing. With a soft landing, it's not always clear when you're actually in the bottom. With a hard landing, it's very clear when you hit the bottom. So it's not clear that we're at the bottom here. As soon as we know that we're at the bottom, then we can start to plan on coming out of it. But if you don't even know you're at the bottom yet, you really can't plan on coming out of it. And that's kind of where we're at here. This is the penalty of a soft landing, is that you're kind of groping in the dark a little bit. Whereas if you have a hard landing, it's very clear. You hit the ground, you felt the vibrations, you've been there for a little while, it's time to recover. Right now, we're not in the recovery phase. There's a whole bunch of uncertainty with the panelists about what the future holds. And in the meantime, we can't seem to get any new orders to come back. And that's the big concern at this point, because we've worked off all that backlog. We've been working it off for over a year. That backlog is now to the point where there's not enough there to keep the factories running for the next 3 months. And I think what you're seeing now is the first month of what will probably be several months of production decline as well as employment decline.
You just mentioned employment. I wanted to ask you about the employment category of your index, because it's now under 50 points. You mentioned layoffs, by the way, just before. Do you think these layoffs are going to impact in the unemployment rates that we're going to know about on Friday?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the PMI tends to precede everything. The Friday jobs number will probably, there's been some issues with the jobs numbers. There's so much dynamics that go on in there. Our numbers are really clean. We have the same panel. We have a simple way of measuring it. And I think that it's going to show up. When I talk about layoffs, so I've been tracking the percent of layoffs, the percent of hiring freezes by panelist companies, and the percent of companies that are attriting down to a lower headcount level. I've been tracking that for over a year. And that percentage of those three had remained pretty constant for the month. And now the layoff piece is becoming a higher percent of the total. So which kind of says to me that, all right, it's becoming more urgent now, because a layoff is something that you can do pretty quickly. When you're going to attrit down, it takes a while. It's almost like a soft landing. If you're going to hiring freeze, that's fairly rapid too. But the fastest way you get headcount down is to lay off and do the write-off, do a reserve against salaries, and you move on, that next month. So we'll see. I mean, I think more and more companies are taking that path, because they still have a business plan to meet in 2023. It's definitely not as optimistic as where they were when they started the year, which means the goal needs to be now on cash flow and profitability, not so much revenue.
Timothy Fiore, Chair at ISM Manufacturing PMI, thank you so much for being in Negocios Televisión.
Thanks, Martha. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day, Timothy.